remain standing and join me in a moment of silence for Frankie Murphy, Hauppauge high school graduate who recently passed away. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Number four on the agenda is the adoption of minutes from the meeting of February 10th, 2015. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Crafa. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5. Motion carries 4, 1, 2. Thank you. Superintendent's updated comments.
Good evening. The first thing that I would like to note is that I have placed on the welcome table to my right a letter from John Flanagan, who, as you know, is one of our state senators. And in this letter, he's asking for support from the public regarding the gap elimination aid and restoring the gap elimination aid to districts throughout New York State. I placed it on the table because at the bottom of the letter, you can certainly click onto his website and view a press conference, but he also gives you a place to visit his website and send a letter of support for his efforts to eliminate the state aid reductions, which all of us have incurred for many years now. I would like to clarify something from our last meeting, and I must acknowledge that I don't think I was totally clear at what was being asked of me when the conversation had to do with the opt-out and students who, with their parents, are not going to be taking the state tests. I had a discussion today with our building level administrators to ensure that the procedures that we're using are consistent from building to building. Because what became clear to me, pursuant to the meeting, was that the real concern and issue from the parents that was being expressed was, do students have to verbally refuse to take the test while in that classroom after their parents have already sent forth a letter? The answer to that is no, they do not. The further answer is, in discussions and consultations with building level administrators, it appears that in the past we have done that on some occasions. So what was made clear today at our meeting, and I see some of my principals here today, was that we will follow the procedure that we have in the past. A parent sends a letter. We keep track of those letters. We provide a list to the classroom teachers of the letters we've received. Someone from the school level calls to confirm with the parent that that is his or her desire. That's particularly important for us as the children go up in years, because we have had children craft their own letters and hand them in, unbeknownst to parents. That has occurred in our middle school. And so we do that double check, not to be imposing or insulting, but just to make sure we have the right information. The test gets placed on the desk, but there is no need to then say to the child, are you opting out of this test? It will simply be pushed to the side, and that will be the protocol that will be used by everybody in the district. So I hope that clarifies, because I really did misunderstand at our last meeting that the issue was that verbal refusal piece. Once again, I have to congratulate so many of our students. We are thrilled to announce that Matthew Fortmeyer, congratulations, Stephen Kim, and Daniel Nasta, have advanced to the final standings of the National Merit Competition. A credit to all the teachers that they have had along the way, and the schools in the community. Our wrestlers are now the Long Island Wrestling Champs, which is phenomenal. 3 of our young men will be participating at the state level as well. Hopefully being able to have a few state champs that come back to us. And our track stars, the girls relay, continue to have success, which they did at the Millrose Games, and they're now on to their next level of competition. So we congratulate all of our students. On the table here, if people would like to gather it after the meeting, is the flyer for a program that we're going to be hosting in our district called Unite the Fight, Communities Against Substance Abuse Forum. A number of years ago, we had a similar event. I think at the time we called it Heroin is Here because there were many articles being published about the increase in heroin use across Long Island. This event is sponsored by the Islip Cluster of School District Superintendents, so there will be people from all of the Islip districts attending. Bayport, Blue Point, East Islip, West Islip, Sayville, Brentwood, a number of districts. But we will have a panel of speakers, including a mother and a son, a mother and son's journey from addiction to recovery. We'll have Charles Bernard, who's a DEA agent, come and speak with us again about the legal responsibilities for parents and their children. We will also have a community liaison officer from the 4th Precinct talking about Operation Medicine Cabinet and the social host laws. And in the gym, following the presentations, we will have over 40 different agencies displaying resources for parents to avail themselves of if they need that kind of support and help. The thing about this particular forum, of which I am very proud, is that when I met with our Youth and Community Alliance earlier this year, and they were asking what could they do to support the goals of our district, I asked them if they would organize an event such as this, because it was timely, and it's time to I think, provide further education on these topics. So this event was organized by our Youth and Community Alliance, and the students on that organization worked very hard on this, along with the support of Joy Ferrara, who is our assistant principal at the high school. So I encourage you to come. It's Monday, March 30th, from 7 to 9 p.m. in our high school auditorium. Please feel free to share the information with neighbors, friends, relatives. Everybody is welcome, whether they live in the area of the Islip school districts or whether they are family and friends. Next, there is an agenda item, 7.1A, and that agenda item is for the board to act upon an amendment to the contract of the superintendent of schools to extend my employment with the district for 1 additional year, that being the 2016-17 school year. I want to publicly state that I have requested that that amendment be to continue the terms and conditions of my current contract for the 2016-17 school year, with the exception that my salary for that time period, that year, be the same as the salary for the 15-16 school year, essentially taking a wage freeze for the 16-17 extension of my contract. And that's my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning, number 6 on the agenda is question and comments regarding tonight's agenda. Only one quick note. There'll be a budget presentation as well, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions again after that. So to the extent that anyone has questions concerning the presentation, I ask that they hold it until after the presentation. Any other questions from the community concerning any of the items on tonight's agenda? Thank you. Seeing none, Mr. Stuccio? Ms. Chris?
Tonight, we would like to provide to the board and to the community that have joined us this evening an overview of the proposed 2015-16 school district budget. I do need to share with everybody here, and the board is aware of this, that tonight is meant to be an overview. We're not getting into the specifics of the budget and line-by-line types of items. You will see at the end of the report, we list the dates of the rest of our budget discussions, and they will be on specific areas within the budget. That is the time to bring questions about those to the board and to the administration. So we're going to begin the budget overview a little bit differently than we have in the past. We usually get right into the budget and the increase and the tax cap, those kinds of things. But we thought tonight that we should begin with a discussion about the state aid component of the budget. Because as you have heard me say before at our meetings, it's a moving target for us. And right now, state aid is embroiled within the politics of the governor versus state aid versus the Senate versus the legislature. So what we wanted everybody to be aware of and to point out to the board that state aid in the executive budget proposal, the governor did propose a 4.8% increase in school aid statewide. Please notice it says school aid statewide. It does not mean that our district would be slated for a 4.8% increase. We could get anything. That would be distributed among the state for an average of 4.8%, which is a $1.1 billion increase in state aid statewide. However, as we all know, he has made the increase contingent upon legislative enactment of his very aggressive education reform agenda. Basically, trying to hold the money hostage to the kinds of changes he would like to see within education. Therefore, he refused to release district-specific aid allocations. So we do not know what percentage of that $1.1 billion in his budget we were slated to receive. But we do know that we had to craft the budget with something. In previous years, we would craft it with state aid from the year before. But this much we know, that in law in 2014-15, when the state budget was adopted, it was required that the state at least allocate 1.7% increase for school districts. Therefore, what we have done is crafted the proposed budget using that 1.7% increase, because that is the minimum amount that we would be receiving in state aid. So our state aid budget, it's also important to note, includes a one-time payment of $241,698 in building aid. And that's for the emergency roof repair that we had done this year at the high school. I want you to hold that thought, because when we review the slide that has specific state aid and how it will be broken down, James will explain the impact of that on our 2% tax cap number. Now, what are these proposed education reforms that the governor would like to see enacted before he lets us know how much state aid we're going to receive? Well, I won't go into detail with all of these, but I know you've heard most of them, that the APPR be changed within districts so that 50% of a teacher's evaluation, and that's of a teacher who gives a state exam, by the way, be based on those state exams. That the probationary period for teachers be extended from 3 years to 5 years. I don't know what they have said or what his recommendation is for those teachers who come to us already tenured in the same area from another district, because they're tenured in 2 years. But I think essentially the governor is recommending a 5-year tenure period. Incentive for high-performing teachers, with the state providing teachers who are rated highly effective on the HEIDI scale, which if you remember is highly effective, developing, and ineffective. Those are the 4 ratings a teacher can get. That's why we call it the HEIDI scale. If you receive a highly effective, you would get a payment of $20,000 from the state. Professional development, these are his proposals. It's true. That's what his proposal is. Okay, professional development, continue to offer teacher improvement plans. Removal of ineffective teachers, provide the swift removal of teachers rated ineffective for 2 years. If you remember, when the APPR was first put forth, one of the things that the governor said would happen is that it would become, quote, and this was his language, easier to remove a teacher who is ineffective using the APPR. And that would be a teacher who had 2 years of an ineffective rating. If you read the articles, the governor's concern is how few teachers across the state have been rated ineffective. And as I said, that's throughout the state. He is also would like to provide for the takeover of failing schools. This is similar to a model used in Massachusetts. The issue some of us have, or the concern, is that he has had state aid try and work to not take over, but run school districts here locally on Long Island, the Roosevelt School District, and it has not been successful. So we're not quite sure where he would be going with that. He has, in his education reforms, information about the DREAM Act, charter school caps, to extend mayoral control in New York City, to expand pre-K, and to create a mentoring commission. Is it really run by his wife?
Yes.
Really run by his,
Yes.
run by his mother, Matilda, for free. The mentoring commission. Okay. So that's kind of a backdrop of where we're working politically, because again, we're not sure where our state aid is going to come in, and we don't know how far along we'll be in this budget process before we actually get that number. So we had to consider the following factors when crafting the budget. I think that the board is aware that we are provided with a very strong recommendation from our auditors to set the levy, which is the amount of money we take in from the taxpayers of this community at the maximum to safeguard for future increases in mandated costs. Future district levy caps may be similar to the proposed budget for 15-16, which we will show you, is well below the 2%. So we constantly have to be understanding that that number is a moving target for us, and we have to try and craft budgets that plan a year in advance so that we're prepared for any changes that may come. We also, in this budget, in crafting it, we had to consider changes in contractual obligations in future years and how they may impact the budget. 4 of 5 bargaining unit contracts expire in June. They expired, pardon me, this past June, and the remaining bargaining unit has a contract that expires this coming June. I do want to digress a little bit and say that I believe that my putting forth to the board the request to freeze my salary for the year is in recognition that this is going to be very difficult as contractual obligations increase. I think all of us have to participate in trying to manage this so that our budgets are sustainable as well as our programs. The next is what I was speaking of before, the uncertainty about future state aid allocations. We're still fighting for that gap elimination. And so, as we developed the budget, what we did is we complied with the parameters of the tax levy cap legislation. You will see that what we're presenting to you is in compliance with that. That we did continue to focus on district goals and the state requirements. The board is well aware of increased state requirements, more, as you would call them, unfunded mandates. An example being the English language learners and the changes in the law that require us to provide significantly more instruction for some of our students. at lower teacher-student ratios than we have in the past. So those are things we had to factor in. We also worked to maintain all current programs, and as a matter of fact, you will see that we are recommending to expand opportunities for our students within this budget. There are programs we're recommending be expanded, some of them connected with our 21st century learners and opportunities for CDOS and programs of that type. We did a comprehensive review of our K-12 district staffing needs. We always do that to ensure that we maximize the use of our staff. Some of them are shared from building to building. And we take a look at that by working with our building principals and directors. We meet with our elementary principals together. We meet with each director, with our high school and middle school principal. We also have continued to provide initial allocations to buildings and departments at a $0 increase. So there are some departments that have the same amount of budgetary allocation for the past 3 years. However, it's important for the board to know that if there is something that is needed, there are extenuating circumstances, we take those things into account. An example of that is technology, for instance. We have upped some technology budgets because it's something that we need to be attending to. So here we are, budget highlights. The proposed budget is $105,436,040. That is a budget-to-budget increase of $998,000 and $519, or a 0.96%. So it's a less than 1% increase on the budget. And when you look at the tax levy and you apply the cap formula, our levy-to-levy increase, that means how much money we raise from our taxpayers in this proposed budget versus the current year, has only increased $299,843. So $300,000 is all we were allowed to increase our budget this year, resulting in our tax levy cap for the 15-16 school year is 0.37%. Now, James is going to take a minute to review the state aid, the breakdown of our revenues and our expenses, and then I will follow up with exactly what we've included in the budget.
Thanks, Pat. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight to listen about the overview of the budget. And I hope that we see you each week in March where we discuss each particular component. I just want to mention briefly the different revenue sources that we estimate for next year, the 15-16 budget. We will have a more in-depth conversation reviewing each line next week at the March 3rd meeting at 8 p.m. We'll go through each revenue item and the tax cap in detail. We'll take a look at state aid. As the superintendent mentioned, this is under current law. The governor, when he proposed a $1.1 billion increase in aid for 15-16, did not release district-specific data. So what we did do is we relied upon information that was put into law last year when the budget was enacted. Governor Cuomo came in together with the legislature. What they did each year that they passed the budget, they passed a 2-year school appropriation bill. And then what they would do that next year is just revise it. So when they passed the 14-15 budget, as the superintendent mentioned, they included a 1.7% statewide increase in school aid for 2015-16. Now that's always been increased each and every year, so we hope that that will be increased. But at this point, this is the best information that we have. It's also important to note that when the governor presented his budget to the public and in the actual language of the appropriation bill, he did mention something conflicting. In the appropriation language, it says that the legislature does not enact these reforms. The state aid received by school districts will be no greater than what was received in 14-15. A couple weeks later, he mentions, school districts should use the 1.7% that was in law. So he did make some conflicting statements. So we feel fairly confident using the 1.7% as our bottom line state aid number. It's important to note that this will change over time. So you'll see here that we are looking, for total state aid, we are fortunately looking at a $620,000 increase. And those are really predominantly fueled by an increase of building aid of $383,745. Of this $383,000, $241,000 is related to the emergency roof project that we completed at the high school this past summer. Unlike other building projects where building aid is paid over a period of 15 years, when you perform an emergency project like we did at the high school, that aid is all paid in the next fiscal year. So that $241,000 that's included in the building aid there, that will be here for next year, 15-16, it will disappear. And we'll see a $241,000 decrease for our building aid in 16-17. So it's important to keep that in mind. Also, another important note with regard to the building aid. We have, again, fortunate to have a $383,000 increase. However, this directly relates to the tax cap. When you calculate the tax cap and what's called the capital exclusion, you add up all of your debt service, all of your bond payments, and all the construction work that you plan, and then you subtract out building aid. So because our building aid went up $383,000, our tax cap went down $383,000. And that's why you're seeing such a low tax cap for next year than we have seen in this district in a number of years. You'll take a look next at transportation aid. This is a result of a new ratio. Every couple of years, each 3 years, we need to submit our routing data to the state and the assignments of transportation aid ratio. We were fortunate that our aid ratio increased, and that's translating to about $106,000 in increased transportation aid for next year. The next big jump is the BOCES aid at $160,000. As the board is aware, we have been making a concerted effort over the past few years to do more purchasing, for example, technology items, servers, iPads, wiring, through Eastern Suffolk BOCES because we receive BOCES aid in exchange. Our aid ratio with BOCES is between 30 and 35%. In addition, this current year, we contracted our copiers not directly from Xerox, but through Eastern Suffolk BOCES and their contract with Xerox. And that's a $200,000 expenditure, and now we're receiving 30% aid on that contract as well, and that's translating into a very big jump in BOCES aid that we have estimated for next year. So again, overall, we are fortunate that at the baseline, we believe we're going to receive somewhere near $620,000 in additional state aid, and that's helping us balance the budget given the very low tax cap calculation. This is just a highlight again of where our state aid was in 2008-9. It was a little over $11.3 million. And where we are, based on the current law in 2015-16, we're still seeing $1 million, or almost a 9% decrease in the amount of state support that the Hauppauge School District is receiving compared to what we received 7 years ago in 2008-2009. This is a direct effect of the gap elimination adjustment, or the GEA, which members of our Long Island Senate delegation, including Senator Flanagan, are working hard to eliminate. But again, it's important to note that although our expenses have gone up quite a bit since 2008-2009, 7 years, our aid is still $1 million less for the state of New York. Other revenue, and this is a very interesting picture as well. We're seeing a large jump in other revenue, $827,000, and this is fueled almost entirely by pilots, where we expect to see another $691,000 in pilot payments next year than what we had budgeted for this year. I will mention that the pilots number is an estimate. It may change over the next few weeks. We rely on the towns of Smithtown and Islip for these figures. We did receive information from the town of Islip about a month ago that we were going to receive an additional $500,000 in pilot payments this current year. Last year we received about $555,000. This January they told us we'll receive a little over $1 million. The reason for that is the additional properties that were added to the pilot program, and that's why we're seeing this very large jump. So we are fortunate that because we budgeted a lower amount this year, we will see that big jump in the budget for next year. We have questioned the towns, how can we better estimate this? And at this point, pilots are not a program that really anybody seems to understand fully. We were told that we really can't give you any advance notice when new properties come online. But one thing I will mention, if you remember when we talked about the tax levy, you saw that the commercial assessed value did decrease, and that caused our homeowners to pay a higher percentage. I believe our homeowners on average paid about 5% increase in taxes, although the tax levy increase was about 2.14%. One of those reasons why the assessed value for the commercial properties decreased is because the property is being removed from the rolls and give them pilot payments. And so this is part of the explanation. Now we are seeing the funds come in, which will help us balance next year's budget. So overall, we're seeing almost $700,000 increase in pilots. We're seeing a bit of an increase in tuition. This is tuition we accept from other school districts providing educational services to their students in our schools and with our staff. And also we're seeing about a $100,000 increase in miscellaneous income. As far as rent, we'll see a slight decrease here. Eastern Suffolk BOCES has been for many, many years renting 3 classrooms in our high school for their own program. Unfortunately, due to enrollment declines at BOCES, they will no longer need our 3 classrooms, and that's why we're seeing a reduction in rent. Take a look now, just briefly, at appropriated fund balance and reserves. We are looking to appropriate the same amount, if necessary, from our reserve funds, the Employee Benefit Accrued Liability Reserve, which pays any kind of retirement pay for unused sick days, as well as a retirement reserve, which can be used to pay the premium for the employee's retirement system. You'll see here fund balance, money that's left over at the end of this year that we appropriate to the next year. We did decrease that by about $750,000. This is due to a change in guidance from the Office of the State Controller. For many, many years, school districts were encouraged to take money remaining at the end of the year and appropriate that to the next year. Now what they're suggesting is to appropriate less money and to make the budgets tighter so there's less money left over at the end of the year. So that's what we're beginning to do, is we're going to start with 2015-16 and recommend that we start to pull back by $750,000. And what that does is that allows us not to have to ensure that $5 million is left over at the end of the year so as not to create a deficit. Now it'll be $4,250,000. And we'll continue to do that over the next few years. But again, this was a change in guidance from the Office of State Controller, so we are beginning this process for next year.
So what is included in this budget? We have accounted for all the current programs. In addition to that, we have a 1.0 teacher for special education. That would be at our middle school based on the needs of our students vis-a-vis their individual educational plans. We have a 1.0 teacher for our English language learners. This is a direct result of the law, the change in the law that I alluded to earlier, where students are entitled to specific services and at a lower student-teacher ratio than we've been able to provide them in the past. We also have a 1.0 STEM teacher. That's science, technology, engineering, math. If you remember, this year in 6th grade, in the wheel, we changed some of the course offerings that we had provided to our students so that we offer them a STEM program. It's based on robotics right now. Our goal for next year is to change the 7th and 8th grade wheel courses, specifically public speaking and creative writing, and to remove them as wheel courses and add instead a continuation of the science, technology, engineering, math opportunity for students. So we'd be adding 2 more 10-week opportunities in that area, which is very important, as you know, because there's your 21st century type of learning activities that we need to be providing for our students, we believe. There are some teachers who are already in the wheel, teaching the creative writing and the public speaking. And those tend to be, just so the board understands, a teaching period of maybe a librarian or a teaching period of an AIS teacher. What our goal in adding the 1 full-time teacher, since we were able to do it within the confines of the tax levy cap, is that we would have teaching these courses to our students, professionals who are trained in STEM. Those pieces that we pull out, we would be using those teachers to offset either class size and reduce it a little bit in the middle school, and or maybe share with the high school if it's a particular discipline like a social studies or science where we need to look to reduce class size at the high school. So the staffing would be 1.0 primarily because if we're making a commitment to the program, we need to make a commitment to the program with teachers who are trained to do this kind of work, as opposed to tenths of teachers from various disciplines. Now, you see the 2.0 teacher reduction, elementary enrollment. In a few slides, I will show you the elementary enrollment projections for next year using the numbers that we used this year for class size, which are the current class size guidelines, being the 25 in K through 3 and 28 in grades 4 through 6. We put this here just to let you know that based on those enrollments, which we will look at in a minute, we would have 2 fewer elementary teachers. However, we did not reduce that in the budget. Those 2 teachers are still included in the budget because, as we know well, our class size enrollment will change right up until we open our doors in September. So while we are projected to have 2 fewer elementary classes right now, we may be coming to the board to say we need to excess a teacher on a preferred eligibility list. The positions are still in the budget as what we call contingent teacher positions for enrollment purposes. We do have in the budget a 0.5 security guard. This is also a very specific recommendation, and that is that our middle school wind up with a 1.0. Right now they have a 0.5 security guard. Wind up with a 1.0 security guard assigned to the middle school. We do not have that right now, and with the increasing activity in our middle school and the in and out all day, our recommendation to the board is to hire a 0.5 security guard, which will result in a 1.0 middle school security guard assigned to that school. We also have money in the budget for an elementary literacy program, grades K through 6. I do need to say to the board that this is in the discussion and development stages, but we needed to fund whatever changes we may be making within this budget. Dr. Michael, our director of ELA, and Mr. Eschbach, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, to share more about this with you, but in the area of curriculum, when we discuss it, we certainly can. To craft action plans. We did it in both ELA and math. We've been looking at some of the areas where we feel our students maybe need a different type of approach, a little bit stronger program. We've had feedback from teachers that with the shift to Common Core, some of the balanced literacy and literacy collaborative strategies may not be hitting the mark. And so we want to discuss with our teachers an elementary literacy program in K-6, whether it be an approach to a teacher's college model, this is the reading we're looking at, or whether it be some other option. Those kinds of discussions are starting with our administrators and soon our teaching staff. Just so that you know, as I said before, current class size guidelines were used when crafting this budget. We do have in the budget, as we do every year, equipment replacement. There's a certain amount allocated to replace used and obsolete equipment. We have a new school bus in this budget, and this would be a district-owned school bus. We're not looking at a full, is that a 44-seat? Is that a big 60, whatever seat bus? We're looking for a smaller bus that we use to transport some of our students. And what we're trying to do, and I know we said it last year because we had a vehicle in last year as well, is to upgrade and replenish our fleet as they become really old and obsolete. So in that vein, we also have in the budget the replacement of one security vehicle, which is pretty obsolete, and this one I have to look up. It's a 1995 automobile. That is having a hard time. It's going to fall apart. And we do need that because obviously our security people use our vehicles. So it would be the replacement of one car. Just a reminder, that comes off the state bid list. It's not as if we can go shopping. There are certain cars that we can get. They're on state bid, and that's how we would be purchasing it. There is money in here for capital work, as we do every year. And we have continued monies in the budget for co-curricular clubs, athletics, fine and performing arts, as well as professional development and conference and travel, which we always approve based on things that meet district goals and state initiatives. I said that we would look at our class size. For your information, based on the numbers we have now, using the K-3 25 cut point and the 4 through 6 28 cut point, you can see our class sizes in Bretton Woods 20, and if I round up 22, 20, 24, and that 4th grade in Bretton Woods is something we'd have to keep an eye on because that's at 27.5. Good possibility that would be one of those contingent positions that I mentioned. Because Bretton Woods, we do tend to have students moving in and out, and our 5th grade there would be at 23 students. Forest Brook, 17, 23, 18, 18, 21, and 25. And the Pines, 20, 22, 20, 24, 23, 24. So the budget that's being presented to the board is based on those class sizes. Now, there is capital money, as we said. I know that there has been some discussion about Whippoorwill and where we're going to go with Whippoorwill and what we're going to do as a facility. But right now, this building is limping along with 2 original boilers, one of which is really limping along. I think it's on half capacity right now. And the reality is, for the immediate future, and long-term possibly, we need to heat this building. We have district staff here, we have renters here, preschools. This is a very highly used building. We have our own students here. When they come and use our gymnasium and things like that, we do our professional development activities here. So we can't afford to have a building that loses heat. So our recommendation is to replace one of the 2 original boilers. It is a little bit more expensive because, as I said, it's original to the building, so it does include asbestos abatement, which we know is an expensive endeavor when we get involved with that. The second boiler would be recommended for replacement in a future budget or bond or capital reserve, dependent upon where we are at the time. But currently, as I said, one of the boilers is leaking and only at about half power. And we worry that if it goes down and something happens to the other, this building will be without heat. So that would be the $450,000 that is in the budget for capital work. Now, this is not the proposed budget per se, but I want to remind the board about this discussion that we may indeed want to consider establishing a second capital reserve fund. You know we have one in existence now. You know the parameters for the use of that fund. Roofs, windows, paving, HVAC systems. We provided to the board a facilities committee report. As the board goes through that report and decides what they want to do about addressing that work, the board may be interested in establishing a second capital reserve. But as you all know, we just can't do it. We have to get permission from the community to do it. So during this budget process, we need to really think about that facilities committee report, because if we want to establish the capital reserve, we need to put it out to the public in May as a proposition. Because first we'd have to put the proposition out, it would have to be approved, and remember, we would have to identify very specific uses for that money. And then we would have to, over time, begin to fund that capital reserve vis-a-vis fund balance, as we're able to do it. So, again, on the slide, it really just says everything that I said. I think it is a discussion that should be had in the context of the budget development process. And so again, here are our highlights. It's a 0.37% tax levy cap for our district this year. It is a budget-to-budget increase of less than 1%. And the budget calendar is as follows. There was a slight revision which will be advertised for the public's edification. Tuesday, March 3rd will not be a regular board meeting and budget. It will simply be a budget-only meeting. So if you're interested in coming and learning more about our revenue, taxes, and the tax levy cap, that will be next Tuesday, March 3rd at 8 p.m. On St. Patty's Day, March 17th, we will have a board meeting where we discuss general support, employee benefits, and our undistributed funds, but that will also be a regular board meeting. So that's the swap. That was originally budget only, so please know the regular board meeting will shift from March 3rd to March 17th. And then on the 24th, we will talk about instruction, which when we say instruction, that is curriculum, assessment, staffing, personality, yes, staffing is instruction. Then we'll have transportation, and again, we'll discuss capital work and recommended capital work. The goal is that by Tuesday, April 14th, the board adopt a proposed 2015-16 budget to be presented to the community in May. Any questions from the board?
Any members of the board have any questions concerning the budget overview presentation? Ms. Mass?
Thank you, Pat and James, for this budget overview. I think my first question has to do with building aid. Tonight, we are going to approve, on the agenda tonight is a letter from our advisors, capital markets advisors, telling us about the fact that there's a recalibration of interest rates and that we would probably lose some of our interest, some money on that. Can you tell me how that affects the building aid that we're seeing here for the budget?
Sure. Under the budget that was enacted last year, for the school year 2014-15, the legislature postponed what's called building aid recalculation. And what it is, in essence, is they take a look at bonds from 10 years, bond issues from 10 years ago, and they look at the interest rates that the building aid is being paid on. So 10 years ago, when we were going for bond issues, interest rates between 4 and 5%. Now, building aid is paid not only on the construction costs, but also on the interest rates. So they're taking a look at 10 years ago, and they're saying, what is the interest rate that the building aid is being paid on for these issues? It's 4 or 5%. What is the statewide average building interest rate now? It's about 2%. And what they're doing is they're reducing our state aid by that difference in interest rates. And the reason why they're doing this is they're saying school districts, as we did, most likely have gone out and refinanced their bonds at that lower interest rate. So therefore, the state feels that they should get their share as well. So we are slated for next year to have a little over $62,000 decrease in building aid. It was built into our building aid figures. We are going to submit a waiver request. We feel that we have a good chance of receiving a waiver, although it is not guaranteed. And if we did, then we'd receive that $63,000 in addition. But we won't know that answer probably till this summer.
Ms. Mass?
On a totally different subject, or do you want to go to somebody else? However.
Sticking with you.
Okay. Elementary literacy program. I know that Literacy Collaborative has been something that we've had for many years. And one of the components, and I understand what you said about Common Core is not aligning exactly with that. One of the components of the Literacy Collaborative is reading recovery. How does anything affect reading recovery as a program?
We have not discussed that specifically yet. When we discuss with teachers and the administrators the total construct of the program, we would be bringing that back to you. I think what Mrs. Mass is saying is that In order to be a literacy collaborative district, you had to have reading recovery, which is your very front line, first year of school primary intervention for our students. It's a program where the teacher sees very limited numbers of students for up to half a year at a time, but it's a very high-risk population. So I'll be honest with you, it is a program we're looking at, and what we're trying to do is do some trend data on the students who participated and see how successful the program is in terms of our students. So we're kind of in the middle of doing that kind of work right now. So for me to specifically say, yes, it's in, yes, it's out, I really can't.
Ms. Mass?
I mean, from a standpoint of a parent, I'm talking, my son is 24 years old now. However, that program, from other people that I've spoken to over the years, has been an extremely helpful program for those children that have been identified as needing a lot more help. So please look very carefully at that.
We will. We understand that, and we understand that there are other things connected to it as well, and that is being able to find the teachers to replace reading recovery teachers who retire. It's, as you know, very expensive training because it's highly specialized. It's tens of thousands of dollars to train a teacher. So we do have teachers that are already trained in that. But we also have some teachers who are retiring. So what we're trying to do is factor in the entire picture in terms of the amounts of students we can service, how we can provide the service, and what are the results of the services we're providing.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Scarito?
On the 1995 vehicle with that security card, we will try to get money for the scrap back over, you know, right?
Absolutely. Whenever we scrap a vehicle, a bus, a grounds vehicle, maintenance vehicle, car, any large piece of equipment, we use something called Auctions International, and we put the item up for bid, and anybody in the public can go online and bid on the item, and the highest bidder wins.
Any further questions from the board concerning the budget overview presentation? Mr. Scarito?
And the last question I noticed, we still don't know is about the library possibly coming to Whitworth, which would be increased revenue.
I would not expect that for the 15-16 budget. We are in discussions and about that. The library is also discussing many options, and they're not sure which option they're going to take at this point regarding a home, but I don't believe anything would be ready for 15-16.
Any further questions from the board concerning the budget overview presentation? Any questions from the community concerning the budget overview presentation? Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that any members would like to have severed or removed? Mr. Scarito?
7.1A, 7.3D10. 7.3D in David 10. 10.
Any others? Anyone else? I'd like to sever 7.1B. I have a motion concerning consent agenda, less those items which have been removed. Thank you, Mr. Fortmeyer. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving to the items that have been severed, starting with 7.1A. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion fails, 3-4. Moving to Mr. Scarito's second severed item, and I'll come back to the item that I severed. 7.3D10. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Second. Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Discussion? Mr. Scarito?
James, on this, it says that certificates of deposit we can use, and I'm looking at the rates, and I know they're higher than that. Is that an average?
Certificates of deposits.
It says that we can invest
Yes.
funds into CDs, and you're saying that at Chase Bank, I'm reading it correct, interest rate is only 0.1, it's higher than that.
Well, we're receiving 0.4 of predominance of preponderance of our money.
Okay?
It is important to note that we can't take out a CD for a year, 5 years, or whatnot. We will, because we need the cash. We need all of the cash in the current year. So any kind of investment like that would be very short term. So what we have found is that using Flushing Bank at the 0.4% is the highest rate that's being offered around, although decreasing. And it's also important to know that we can only do business with commercial banks and banks that will collateralize our money. And what that means is if we have, let's say, $30 million in the bank, Flushing Bank has to buy $30 million worth of treasury bills, a little over $30 million worth of treasury bills, send that to another bank, Bank of New York in our name. So if that bank went belly up, we get in the car, we go straight to the Bank of New York, we go to those treasury bills, we sell them immediately, and we have our $30 million. Because all of our investments must be 100% safe. We cannot ever risk losing a cent under the law.
So when it says the district may invest funds in certificates of deposit, you're talking like a 3-month thing, or
Not
you're
a
talking anything?
couple weeks. And the rates on that would be less than the 0.4%.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on 7.3 D10? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Going back to 7.1 B, the appointment of Board of Inspectors. I believe this vetting of these individuals that are appointed is done by our district clerk pursuant to policy. Could you discuss a little bit how these individuals were vetted, if they were vetted, and how they were vetted?
Yes. Of the 4 people that are on the agenda, 2 people approached me during the school election that I did last year and expressed interest in coming to work with us. The other 2 people were referred to me by election workers that I had worked with during the library vote. So I met with all 4 of them. They were all certified by the Board of Elections. They have all worked in primaries. They've worked in the general elections and any special elections. I just wanted to get a feel that they understood what would be expected of them if they came here and worked with us, if they were going to be professional, discreet, neutral, and just explained a bit how the school election differs from the general election. And after meeting with these 4 people, I felt that they would be good to come on board and work for us.
Thank you. Any, well, take a motion. I'll make a motion concerning 7.1B. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Discussion from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That concludes the consent agenda. Moving to committee reports. I don't believe there have been any action in any of the committees between our last meeting. I believe Mr. Crapo, Dr. Crapo, you have the HIV/AIDS committee meeting. You have this Thursday. And I just asked the district clerk include in future agendas the letter I, which would be the bond committee, which we formed at our last meeting. Any further comments concerning committee reports? Mr. Kiley?
The Advocacy Committee, I'll be attending the Hauppauge conference, Capital Conference, March 15th and 16th.
Great. And I believe the funding for that was previously approved by the board at our last meeting, and I believe last July as well. Policies, there are no policies on the agenda. Moving to item 10, which is correspondence. Correspondence sent to the district. The list of such correspondence is located in the binder over there. Moving to discussion matters, letter to Governor Cuomo. Ms. Chris?
There are numerous districts across Long Island who are sending to the governor a letter with an attached proclamation, if you will, from their school board, indicating that the board demand that the governor of the state of New York decouple his funding of public schools for the children with the request for educational policy reform, which he, it is stated, has no constitutional right to, or power to enact. I have provided the board with the proclamation and bring it forth to you to decide whether you would like, as a board, to send it to the governor and create a cover letter indicating your position and that it comes from you with support of the board.
What is your recommendation that we send that?
I believe we should send that, yes.
Any comments from anyone on the board concerning that? Does anyone want to make a motion? Oh, yes, Mr. Kraft.
Just, I don't know if anyone else is going to comment, but I do agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it's absurd that he's holding the money hostage just to get his way. So, for the record, I do agree, and I think we should send that letter.
So with that being said, I'll make a motion that we send a letter annexing that resolution which the superintendent has proposed. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Scarito. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item 12 on the agenda, new business. Do any members have new business they'd like to discuss? Mr. Kiley?
I just want to follow up. My third grade son brought home this packet, a Hauppauge math department packet, which was a surprise to me. Can you just give us some insight what this really is?
Well, I'm not sure why it was a surprise, to be candid with you, Mr. Kiley, because I informed the board about it and what it was. We had feedback from parents last year and this year that they struggled with helping their children with math homework in the Common Core. We had the resource this year to develop that booklet without additional pay for people. And we produced that in-house. That is designed to help parents in a module-by-module approach with the math homework. Our decision was to provide it in hard copy this year so that parents would be aware of it, would understand it's there, and hopefully use it. And it is online as a resource as well. And in future years, it is our intent to have teachers share its existence with parents at back-to-school night and for them to access it via online.
That was going to be my second question. Could we have accessed it online instead of sending every student 50 pages?
We certainly could have, but our concern is always that not all people will go online if they don't know what it is. So for the remainder of this year, we made a very deliberate decision to send them home and beginning next year, do it all via online.
Thank you.
Any further comments concerning that? Any other items of new business that any members would like to discuss?
I have something I would like to say.
Sure.
I would like to say that tonight has proven for me to be a very bittersweet moment. I look at this Hauppauge School District with a lot of love and a lot of pride. And during the last 8.5 years, I do believe we have accomplished an awful lot together. We've restored community confidence in the fiscal management of the district, which did not exist 8.5 years ago. We've brought consistency of leadership to the office of the superintendent, which has historically not existed in this district. I believe we've vastly improved our facilities for our students and our staff via bond work and carefully crafted budgets. I know we have enriched the curriculum offerings for our students. IB, increased AP, FLES, math, ELA, social studies, science. We've brought legislative recognition to Hauppauge as well, and along with it has come revenue and funding. And I believe we've improved our public relations initiatives and enhanced our technology, both the infrastructure and the program. And we brought to the community our best efforts at educational forums, community universities, superintendent showcases, Stage the Change, and there really is so much more. So, I do feel that there's still more work to be done, and I would have relished the opportunity to be engaged in that work with the Board of Education and the Hauppauge staff. But as you've all heard, this is not to be. I want to thank all boards with whom I've worked for their support through the years. And to the board and the community, I pledge to continue my work the remaining days in this district with the same dedication, energy, and passion which I have throughout my tenure as the leader of this wonderful district. And I just want to say to administrators that are here this evening that I know came here for a very specific reason of support, I thank you and your colleagues for all the support through the years as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business from any board members? Seeing none, any comments or questions from the community concerning anything related to the district? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for an adjournment. Thank you, Mr. Scarino. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Craft. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Is that a yes? Abstention? Motion carries 6-0-1. Our next meeting will be March 3rd, 2014, which will be a budget meeting. Thank you.